Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who will be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 312, with Julia Sherwin from the GlobalPost Media's Global Education Initiative. She leads that to help make sure that faculty and students and institutions have access to high-quality international journalism, and we get into talking about that work specifically and how it piggybacks on the ongoing open educational resources trend movement, OER. So I'm just really excited about that. Obviously, it's just another kind of piece of the puzzle of making higher education as accessible as possible, making sure that just high-quality learning resources and kind of assets and content can make their way into the hands of kind of both sides of the equation, students and faculty, and they can really use that to inform what they're talking about and how they're talking about it and make sure that it's as relevant and engaging as possible. So really appreciate her time and all that she shared here. Make sure to connect with her and her work at GlobalPost Media's Global Education Initiative, all linked in the episode description here. So without further ado, this is episode number 312 with Julia Sherwin. Grateful to have some time with you here, Julia. It's 2026, start of a new season, start of a new year, but I wanted to have you on to have what I felt like would be kind of a unique conversation. So I appreciate you being game, but introduce yourself to our audience and give a brief overview of your professional background before we get to the rest of our conversation.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you today, Dustin. Thank you so much for having me on. My name is Julia Sherwin. I am the Executive Director for GlobalPost Media's Global Education Initiative. And really what that is, GlobalPost is an international daily newsletter. There's retail subscribers, but through this Global Education Initiative, we provide free subscriptions to students and faculty throughout the world. Started out on the college level. We have since expanded that to high school and homeschooled students as well. And really the mission is to help students develop global literacy. As we all know and we've heard through various surveys and things of the like, many students do not understand the world around them, especially U.S. students. There have been surveys through the Council on Foreign Relations and National Geographic where they've polled students about some international knowledge and information, and sadly, many scored overall about 55%. So we're talking about students who can't look at a map and identify where Israel is. So really, the whole goal of this program is to help students understand the world they're in, because this is the world they're going to compete in eventually when they go to get a job.
Yeah, and I think that's something where, like, even thinking back to me, like in high school, at that point, we were much more of a global society in terms of kind of the advent of the internet. But yeah, I mean, it's only, I think, increased, certainly, like you're saying, in terms of the type of companies these students might want to work at or the industries or whatever else. It just, that trend line has certainly continued, and these global events impact people. Something that is happening halfway around the world is impacting our everyday. So it's like just having that kind of awareness, understanding, context, and everything is just, become increasingly important. But I'm curious in terms of like your background, I guess, to sit with this for a moment, like what kind of brought you to this work? Any sort of background there?
This role marries my background like pretty perfectly. I started out in corporate communications and was always attracted to roles where storytelling was a central theme. And in addition to PR and communication roles, I was also a local radio host for 5 years. And I've written for my newspaper and I had a column. And so I've married these worlds with journalism. And I was also an adjunct instructor at Temple. I'm a mom of 3. I have 2 in high school and 1 in college. So it all comes back together where global literacy and education and journalism all rolled into one. So when I found out about this role, I've been here about a year now. as the executive director. It was sort of the perfect marriage of my background and interests.
Yeah, and I think like segue and tee up because your kind of connection to that idea of elevating and integrating journalism, these resources, these people that are doing that work and kind of marrying it into education is sort of a lot of times in these interviews, that idea of like, so what? Like, why is it important? Because I think it is that idea of other people offering where it might be just sort of like two students who opt in, like, hey, here's a great resource to better understand current events through some journalistic outlet, or just it just being like that people are like the ones who are pursuing it, or maybe the ones that like need it the least, because it's like, okay, I'm already interested in it. I want this subscription to keep up with it more long term. But I think what I appreciate about what you're doing is really trying to bring it in on both sides, that students and faculty members can gain it as a resource. And ideally, the faculty maybe are integrating it into their coursework and kind of lesson plans and stuff. So I think we at least touched on, again, just a very 30,000 feet view of why this is important. But to bring it down a little bit, what do you see as the importance of helping to elevate the awareness of like global events, especially within sort of like the classroom context?
Really today, anyone who wants to pursue a career in business or healthcare, education, or public service, they should understand the wider world in which they live. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's that we're all connected, right? I mean, so much flows across borders, whether it's people or goods and services or viruses, weapons, and pollutants. We are all just connected. And young people may recognize the importance of international literacy, but the surveys, as I mentioned, are still showing there's this big knowledge gap. This is really important today for students to be able to compete in the business world. They need to understand, for instance, why something that happens in a port in Asia will affect supply chains for products that are coming into Ohio. And these are things that their future employers are going to expect them to understand and have that kind of global contextual awareness.
The pandemic, I think, is probably what's going to be this sort of case study for so many things that really reinforce this point, because it was like, where are we getting some of our like drugs or medicine or different things like that? And then the other thing, like you're getting at too, with like pollutants or environmental stuff, was like in just the past few years where there's like wildfires in Canada or something, and then that smoke is blowing down and impacting people again, where it's like, yeah, that's our neighbor. We're good neighbors and partners, but like just that idea of, I think it had pretty far-reaching effects. So like that idea of appreciating those sort of aspects. And I think if you want to sort of like expand on this at all or anything, but like that idea of like in the classroom context, again, there's a situation where like an individual student opts in to get a Wall Street Journal subscription or whatever. They could read it and they might maybe understand it or whatever, but it's just like, you're just leaving them to their own devices. I think that classroom context, it's like, okay, we're reading about this current event that reinforces this point, and we're able to maybe have a more dynamic back and forth or whatever else, or discuss things versus like you're just reading it and then just sort of like, that's it. So those things you mentioned in their importance optimizes that sort of experience to better understand current events internationally when you're doing it in a classroom environment.
This is one of the reasons we made access to faculty free as well. And we created earlier this year a study guide so that instructors can really incorporate the stories and global literacy into the classroom. So whether it's a news assignment or a video, create a video, or just a weekly news quiz, or overall just helping students engage with global affairs. So instructors can contribute to their long-term development as informed global citizens. And that, partnership does definitely happen in the classroom. So we see teachers and instructors, whether they're teachers that are helping students to compete in Model UN competitions, or college level instructors who are bringing GlobalPost into their international relations or journalism or political science class. It's really fascinating, because one of the things that I think a lot of students in school may have a hard time picturing how they can have an effect on their world. But the stories that we're tracking in GlobalPost involve a lot of Gen Z protests and uprisings in other countries like Morocco and Malta and Nepal and the Philippines, where they're affecting change. They're affecting real change. because they're tired of elite and corrupt regimes, poor social services, and things that Gen Z are just like able to do these amazing things in other countries. And I think that helps, at least on the US side, for Gen Z students to say, hey, I really do have a voice here. And look at what my peers are doing in these other countries.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting call out. The other thing I thought of too, study abroad could be a super like high impact practice for a student, and the idea that whether it is in preparation, like, hey, I know I'm going to be going to whatever country, let me just kind of know what's going on there. Or it could maybe like have this light bulb moment of, okay, I'm just like perusing, reading, whatever. Oh, this thing I'm interested in is happening. You maybe at the forefront, or just like they're at a phase of really doing a lot of great environmental work or whatever else. Like that could start to be like, oh my gosh, like, man, if I could study abroad there and experience that or explore it or whatever, at least just, again, like motivating or inspiring people to be open to an opportunity to do study abroad because it could really correlate with their interests or that sort of thing. There are very kind of tactical pieces about this, about like preparing you for the workforce and that sort of thing. But then like, yeah, it is some of that like, okay, I'm seeing people protest a thing or whatever else. And that's just like the squishy emotional part of it, of just like how you see the world, how you see yourself as part of the world, and how you see yourself maybe being able to experience and interact with the world.
That's right. And so many people, like, they think about study abroad, and we work with a lot of schools who, through study abroad programs, who get their students to subscribe to GlobalPost. I think, oh wow, I want to go to Italy. I want to spend the semester there, but which is great. But there's so many other things happening in the countries surrounding Italy that they may not have the context on. And another thing I should mention, Dustin, is every story that we publish, there's 5 stories a day, and they have a country map. So when they're reading the story, they can see in very colorful outline exactly where that country is in relation to other countries. And like the story yesterday was about Montenegro and people going there to a kind of like very rich people across the world, millionaire and billionaires, to escape, kind of like it's got a good tax haven there. And it's right across the Adriatic from Italy. And what does that mean for like people and travel and what students can see? And I just think it's really important that they understand that outside of the U.S., well, these countries are many are smaller, some are not, of course, but they're just bordered by all of these other countries where there's just very different political situations happening among them. And this is just a great opportunity for them to understand. You're spending a semester in Italy, but you're going to hop on a train and you're going to go to Switzerland and Germany and all these other countries. What's happening there?
Yeah. What I've understood, I guess, about myself and why I really enjoyed being a history major on sort of like a more existential level is just like craving context, that idea of like, why? So like that idea of like, why is that happening in Italy? It's like, well, actually it has something to do with all these rich people going to Montenegro or something, like that idea of just being, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, I get it. So
Right.
Just that idea of, again, like if you're reading about something, hopefully you're being curious about like, why is that happening now in the way it is? And having a resource to follow that curiosity, or just better contextually understand things, I think is really valuable.
That's right. I mean, we want to help students connect the dots between the international events that are happening and their daily lives. And, unfortunately, traditional news sources often assume a lot of prior knowledge that students don't have. And traditional news sources, at least, mainstream ones in the US, they're not covering these stories. So they're not covering that political uprising in Malta. I mean, yes, they may be eventually, like the New York Times and those bigger outlets and things like that. And I should also mention we're nonpartisan. So GlobalPost does curate, like with news sources from Reuters and the Associated Press and Al Jazeera and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. So the goal is completely nonpartisan. So we have readers in rural areas from Christian schools and very conservative backgrounds. And we also have the major universities, Yale and Harvard, and all of those with students who are subscribers. So it really does run the gamut. We've got a lot of students reading throughout Africa and all throughout the global South. So it's really just far and wide. 111 countries right now. We have students and faculty, and more than 16,000 subscribers. And What's fascinating about that I should mention is this started our CEO and editorial director. His name is Phil Balboni. He started this in 2017 largely as an experiment at the University of Oklahoma. He's a longtime media entrepreneur. He understands that there is this knowledge gap with students, and there were no ulterior motives. He just wanted to make sure that students have access to this without a paywall, without having to worry about a subscription. As long as they're a student and they're enrolled at an institution, they have access. And the faculty or anyone working with students, as long as they're employed in a school, they have access. So that was 2017. Here we are 9 years later, and we've got nearly 17,000 subscribers in 111 countries. So that's something we're super proud of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that ability to sort of like opt into that and put it more at the forefront for students versus, like you're saying, where something may get some coverage from New York Times or other similar publications in the US, but it's like you'd have to really dig for it or know what you're looking for. So again, like there's people that are going to be hyper tuned to certain things, but like to try to like kind of chip away and expose more people to more information about what's happening in more parts of the world, that sets up kind of a connection that I was making in my head. We talked about before that definitely was part of the kind of the genesis of this episode and conversation was the idea of like, this feels like a great kind of complement to a movement that's really been happening for a long time of like OER, open educational resources, that idea of a student should not have to pay for a textbook or anything else that is the necessary kind of parts of a course that they're taking that they've already paid for with their tuition, whatever. So that idea of this could really be a GlobalPost subscription is a great companion to whatever OER, hopefully a faculty member is utilizing for their course and everything. How does your work serve as that companion to the OER efforts that are happening right now?
I think it's a great complement to those efforts that are happening right now. And we are tracking them, and it's a long time coming, right? I think it's fantastic that there are schools like your interview with University of the People, democratizing education. I've got a daughter right now applying to college and one in college. And wow, it's super expensive, right? We all know this. But the OER democratizes access to knowledge, and we're doing the same to promote global literacy. So this is a tool that when you're reading regularly, students are going to develop better news reading skills and be able to delve into these topics and avoid the mis and disinformation that can circulate among tools that we all know and love. And my children tend to dive into them quite a bit as well. They're great, but they're probably not the place to go and get in-depth global news and information because you're getting it filtered through somebody's opinion and they were I think it's just a fantastic complement to this whole OER movement right now.
Yeah, and it's a funny sort of call out to those other like resources where it's like, yeah, I love that there are people devoting their time to like talk about things on TikTok, but it's like they're obviously compressing it down to probably like a couple minute video and whatever. So like even best case scenario, more often it's like you are completely telling the truth. So like that idea of something that is going to be a more reliable thing and just like, yeah, that's like right on tap. Like I could just like go right to that and just get what I need versus needing to kind of like find things that may not be fully reliable. So yeah, I think just wanting to give space for that call out of like, if you as an institution value and want to prioritize more accessible learning resources for your courses through such things as OER or whatever else, like this is a great companion to that.
Yeah, professors are on board. When they get a chance to read it first and understand what it's all about, they do want to bring it to their students. I'm working with a professor at Vinh University. It's one of the top universities in Vietnam. And I have the pleasure of seeing the signups come in each day through my email, and I can see student after student just signing up for it. And this particular professor teaches entrepreneurial classes. It's relevant to so many disciplines. It's relevant to any discipline, really. Like I said, if you're going to pursue healthcare or business or what have you, it's really important for you to understand what is happening around the world, because even if you never leave the United States, people come here, and that's important for you to understand those various nuances.
Yeah, people, goods, and services, all the things are coming and going.
That's right. We're more connected than ever.
Yeah, and even that idea, because like for me, like a weird I guess I'll just call it weird, whatever. But like throughout most of my life, like I've played video games and a lot of times play them online. And like certainly you end up playing games with mostly people in your neck of the woods, but like it is the idea at least of that can be like an instantaneous connection is just exposure to the world through like that kind of like innocuous way. Like, and I don't know, it's just that idea of like just appreciating or understanding and valuing the global society that we live in and just all these sort of like ad hoc ways that it happens or impacts your daily life and everything. And just even like, I guess for me, it's that idea of like, wow, I guess like most of my life there really has been just all these different outlets and avenues to like interact with people from all over the world.
You bring up a really good point because I worked for PR agencies, and during the start of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, I was working with a company, and their developers were offshore, which is very typical, and many were in Ukraine. And it's like, wow, we're trying to develop the narratives for this company and to help them to bring their products and services into the US market. But here they have like these people who are literally like hunkered down, still working, but in Ukraine. So it affects every discipline. I think I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, I literally had that experience. The company I worked at had that kind of dynamic, and it's the idea of like we kind of have to be sort of like cognizant of what's the latest in Ukraine because we have a handful of employees there. So we will wrap up here, though, as we always do. We've given some great kind of thoughts, but we always like to give our guests the final word here. Just a thought, call to action that you would like to share to wrap up the episode.
We need to prepare students for a world that has unprecedented challenges today. So we have economic instability, the threat of war, political coups. So we need to equip students with the tools they need to navigate these global events. And they can start in the classroom by reading every day something like GlobalPost. They can go and sign up, globalpost.com, click on our Global Education Initiative. You can sign up right there and self-enroll, whether you're a student, faculty. The form shows homeschool student, high school student, college student, or faculty member. You just click on the one that applies to you. You sign up, you'll get the newsletter the very next day via email. It's emailed Monday through Friday, about 6 a.m. Eastern time. It's just the 5 days a week. And that's a great start to give students and faculty that global contextual awareness.
And I think for our audience, it's like certainly advocating for integrating it more like strategically and intentionally versus like it'd be a shame if an institution like the word gets around and a lot of students are sort of like opting in. But again, because I think it's that idea of like there's such an opportunity for bringing it into the classroom with intentionality to have the discourse and the conversation and all that. But certainly, yeah, if nothing else, like if any students happen to be listening, just go sign up. And then I would hope that like the head of a department or whatever else is listening and sort of like, okay, let's try to like play around with this with some kind of a strategic intention.
They can download the free study guide. So we have this free study guide also on our website. So when you go to globalpost.com, you'll see a drop down for Global Education Initiative, and you also see study guide. And that's really where that intentionality comes in, Dustin. So they can download that and find creative ways to integrate it into the classroom teaching. I've actually spoken to a professor who said, I'm just going to use this. I'm not even going to use a book this semester. She teaches international business, and that's what she was going to do. So there's absolutely opportunities there for faculty and students alike, but thank you for emphasizing that because it really does take that advocacy from a professor to guide students through this and to get them excited about it because there's a lot out there, and it is a very exciting opportunity for students to see how they can make a huge impact in the world.
Absolutely. We'll have ways to connect with you and GlobalPost in the episode description. Appreciate you for jumping on and sharing all that you did and doing the great work that you do.
Thanks so much for having me on, Dustin. This has been great.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.net.